Hello and welcome. My name is Chris from ChristopherHole.com. Welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about building and changing habits. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the anatomy of it. So we're going to be doing, the inside work, and then we're going to start talking about the practice of it, which I would call the outside work, in future videos. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of this video, I'd just like to introduce you to my social channels. So if you want to come along to Twitter, Facebook or Instagram, you can like and follow on there, ask any questions that you need to. It'd be great to see you there. It'd be great to answer those questions. Alternatively, you can come to the website www.christopherhole.com/join, and you can sign up to our monthly newsletter, where we put together these videos and more videos, all based around a theme. So we'll talk about habits, we'll talk about health, we'll talk about fitness, we'll talk about exercise, we'll talk about nutrition, we'll talk about mindset, all these different subjects that we'll be talking about, all in video format. So it's very interactive, and you can learn more about them from the newsletter as well. So again, it'd be great to see you there. It'd be great again to answer any questions that come off the back of any of those videos. So back to the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about. We are going to be focusing on the anatomy of building and changing habits, and then, as I mentioned, in future videos we're going to talk about the actual practice of it and how we go about doing it. So there are three sort of aspects or three parts of our anatomy that we're going to be talking about. The first one is the central nervous system, the second one is neuroplasticity, and the third one is myelination. Now, you may have heard of some of them, you may not have heard of some of these. Don't worry about it, because I'll introduce it sort of from the beginning and try to make it easy enough for you to understand and apply it to something that you can recognize. So the central nervous system, which you may be aware of, in vertebrates, it comprises of the brain and the spinal cord. So you can see on this diagram here, you've got the brain at the top, you've got the spine that goes down through the spinal column of the spine, and then you can see all the little nerves that come off it, and the nerves are the peripheral nervous system. But all we're going to focus on is the brain and the spinal cord, because to a certain degree, that's where our habits and our behaviors lie, within the central nervous system, which brings us nicely onto what's called neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. So what's happening as we go throughout life is our behaviors are changing. So as sort of young children, it's all about play and sort of experiencing the initial parts of life, if you will. Then it moves into our teenage years, where it might be obviously still about play. There'll be an aspect of that, but then school and study and things become a little bit more serious. We might start playing a sport or whatever it might be. So you can start to see the priorities are starting to change. And then again, as we come into like adult life and adult years, again, our priorities will change again. It might be towards family, it might be towards work. Obviously, there may be an aspect of play involved and an aspect of learning involved, but you can see that a little bit those extra behaviors and habits are now coming in, or priorities are coming in. And then as we get on later in life, it might then, if we decide to retire, obviously the work aspect goes, and you can start to see that the priorities are changing. So throughout life, our priorities and behaviors and habits are changing. Now, that doesn't just happen on the outside, so in our actual physical life, it happens on the inside as well, and it's happening within in the central nervous system, and that's where neuroplasticity comes in. It's that reorganizing of the brain, which reorganizes the habits, which reorganizes the behaviors, which reorganizes our outside life and how we do things. Now, that happens due to a process called myelination. Now, myelination is where the connections occur and they become stronger connections, and this is where we can start talking about habits in a little bit more detail. So myelin is a fatty white substance that surrounds the axon of some nerve cells. So you can see here on this diagram here, we'll call this bit here would be called a cell body, and then all these little arms that come off it are the axon. Now, the myelin forms a like a surrounding to that electrical wire. So this is an electrical wire, and like any electrical wire, it has a surrounding, and what surrounds it keeps the electrical signal within, not necessarily within the wire, but around the wire. And then the thicker the substance, the quicker it moves, and the quicker it moves makes the habit or the behavior more or less accurate. So the more myelin that's there, the faster the signal, the more accurate the habit and the behavior. The less myelin that's there, the slower the signal, the less accurate the habit or the behavior, if that makes sense. So it is essential for proper functioning of the nervous system. So as we start developing habits through repetition, I'm going to talk about this in the next video in a little bit more detail. Myelin, more and more myelin starts to form around those axons and those habits and those behaviors. What that then does, that refines and improves, or has the ability to refine and improve the behavior. Now, when we go into the next video, which is what I'm going to talk about next, is the actual the process of what's going on in a bit more detail with regards to repetition, but also something called deep practice, or what Dan Coyle calls deep practice. He wrote a book called The Talent Code, which is a very informative book around habits, behaviors, and improving skills, if you will. So that's all I'm going to talk about in this video. As I mentioned at the start, please check out the socials on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Come to the website, join the newsletter at christopherhall.com/join. It'd be great to see you there, and we are going to talk more about habits in the next video, so I will speak to you then. So that's Chris from christopherhall.com. I'll speak to you in the next video.